for instance? I mean, should Australians be prepared for having their faces scanned to use social media?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's podcast. Tonight I've got a very special guest, Wade Northausen. How are you this evening?
Yeah, g'day, Leon. How you going there, mate?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Lovely to have you back on. We've had quite a lot of things happening,
haven't we? What? Yeah, and it's really great. It's really great to be back here, Leon, and having a bit of a yarn, mate. Because as you said, there's a lot going on, and it's moving very, very quickly, and it's very serious stuff.
Absolutely. Now, I want to play a clip. It's from our beloved, benevolent, dear leader from the socialist state of Victoria. I'll play the clip, and I'll get your reaction to it.
Jews increasingly feel that simple promise of a modern multicultural Victoria is being denied them. How else do you describe a real and demonstrated increase in reports of anti-Semitic incidents? How else do you describe a tendency for extreme, dangerous and radical protest that is allowing anti-Semitism and hate to thrive within it? This is simply unacceptable in our modern multicultural state. It's unacceptable in our modern multicultural Victoria. And today, the Government of Victoria renews its promise to Jews and to everyone of every background. Whoever you are, whoever you pray to, you deserve to be safe and welcome here in this state. And today too, we support that promise with strong action to fight hate and help Victorians heal. Action that I will now outline. We will be setting a standard that we do not tolerate anti-Semitism. We do not tolerate anti-Semitism. Just as we do not tolerate any form of hate, racism or discrimination against a Jew, a Muslim, a Sikh, a Hindu, a Chinese, or against a woman, against a gay, lesbian or trans person. It's all despicable. All racism is wrong. All racism is evil. It's hateful. It's corrosive. And anti-Semitism is racism. There are too many. There are too many who want to qualify anti-Semitism or make excuses for it, and I want to make it absolutely clear that I never will. We've also had enough of the protests that have caused division and disruption in our streets. Now, peaceful protests can and must be protected in this state. Protests that harm others cannot. Firstly, we will ban the flags and symbols of listed terrorist organisations in public. That includes Hamas, Hezbollah and several other groups, including white national extremists and radical racist violent extremist right-wing groups. We will also ban the use of face masks and balaclavas at protests. We know they are being used to conceal identities, shield agitators from crowd control measures like capsicum spray. Well, face masks aren't a free pass to break the law. And there should be no place to hide in this state if you're a racist, stirring up hate on the streets. And we're also going to ban the use of glue, rope, chains, locks and other dangerous attachment devices that protesters use to cause maximum disruption and also endanger others. There was an incident that occurred, an incident that was both rightly condemned but also an incident that became the genesis of the work that we have released on introducing stronger anti-vilification laws to the Victorian Parliament. But we know it's rearing its head again and we will act. We will legislate to protect the right for people to gather and pray, free from fear, free from harassment and free from intimidation from protesters. We will also legislate to thwart protests and disturbances at shuls, at temples, at churches, at mosques and gurdwaras, anywhere in Victoria.
Talk about the fox guarding the hen house. I've got quite a few things that I could unpack, but over to you, Wade. What's your reaction?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing here is what has been, planned for a long, long time, to tell you the truth, Leon. We're seeing, I think the overview is the government wanting to ban all protests. That is blatantly obvious. And this is just one of the sleight of hand, one of the dishonest ways in which they intend to go about that. We've seen with other stuff, the government come out and they say, oh, we're going to do this to protect you and keep you safe, all the rest of it. But the bottom line is that there are certainly a lot more things that can be done to protect people or protests or whatever that are not being done. And I think it's very, very interesting that the government has allowed these so-called protests to go on for so long and become so radicalised and so violent, when clearly the capacity was there through the, and I use this term very loosely, the law enforcement system to squash any violent attacks in some protests. Because if we remember back just only a couple of years ago, peaceful protesters against lockdowns were attacked and bashed and assaulted, arrested, unlawfully locked up. They were unlawfully, violently, attacked, as we saw with the Nick Patterson case. There was a lot that happened there that was illegal, and the police, who at the time they weren't police, they were thugs. They had no problem in sending armoured vehicles, the kind of things you see in war zones, out after the Victorian and Australian people. So
mums and dads and
precisely. So I would venture to say, and we can talk about the origins of this soon, but I would venture to say that if we've seen these protests become as violent as they have become, and as dangerous as they have become, and they haven't been stopped, then I would say that that is exactly the result that the government want, and also the leaders of the Victoria Police Force. They want this situation to escalate. They want the violence on the streets, because that gives them then the excuse in the eye of the public to say, we're going to come in and make all these laws about protesting and masks and flags and God knows what. So at the end of the day, this is a total, absolute scam. Jacinta Allen, once again, should be locked up in jail forever. So should the Chief Commissioner of Police, and so should many of the people in the media, because they are all working together to create this problem and to escalate it, so that they then say, we've got to come in with these whole new range of laws, and we've got to protect people against anti-Semitism or whatever's going on. You know, they couldn't give us stuff about Jews or Palestinians or anybody else.
Exactly.
I put it to you that in the eyes of Jacinta Allen, our governments, the police commissioner, all this sort of thing, that whether you're a Jew, Palestinian, American, Russian, it doesn't matter. You are all just parasites and scum, and they're taking a lot of action to make sure they can do as much damage and harm to the Australian people as they possibly can. And this is just another part of the fraud and of the attack on the Australian people.
Exactly. If you ask any Jewish person on the street, the main source of anti-Semitism, of Jew hatred, is from the academia, the left-wing academia, and from the government, the left-wing government, so i.e. the left. And the type of anti-Semitism that we've seen since the end of the Second World War, is a Soviet type of anti-Semitism. And that's what the Labor government, that's what the establishment here has been promoting for many decades. And when Jacinta Allen was confronted after the arson attack at the synagogue, people weren't demanding to know, why don't you pass new laws? They weren't pressuring her to do that. They were asking her, why don't you use your existing laws, the laws that you have, the powers that you have at your disposal, to clamp down on these violent, they're not protests, they're riots, they're mob. You're dealing with a violent mob that not only openly wants to destroy the Jewish people, but Australia. These are the same people that march on Australia Day and they call it Invasion Day. So the police, the authorities have given these people a blank check. And like you said, Wade, that's all by design, essentially. What I'd like to do, I want to play a clip from Avi Yamini, and I just want to get your reaction to it, just really quickly.
But Jacinta Allen's newly announced measures to combat anti-Semitism are not really about protecting Jews from the horrific rise of anti-Semitism on our streets.
The government also said it's looking at banning the use of face masks and balaclavas at protests. The government says that they know that they're being used to conceal identities.
Well, that's true. We have seen for over a year now people heading to the city, rallying against Jews, often turning violent and hiding their faces to avoid facing any consequences.
Particularly right-wing organisations wear balaclavas during public protests.
What? Really? Particularly right-wing organisations? Surely that's not who the government's targeting with these new measures. Because the people marching each week against Jews are not right-wing extremists, but rather left-wing extremists and Islamo-fascists who come wrapped in keffiyehs and COVID masks. So I guess the question is, will this new face mask ban even stop the actual haters that have been holding our city hostage each week? Or is Labor giving their voter base of leftists and Islamists some sort of sneaky exemption?
The government says that exemptions, though, would apply for legitimate health, religious or cultural reasons when wearing a mask.
Oh, how convenient. Exemptions for health, religious or cultural reasons, meaning when they rock up to an anti-Israel, anti-Jew, pro-Hamas protest wrapped in a Palestinian keffiyeh like the terrorists in October 7, or a burqa, or even the international uniform of an insane leftist with your COVID-19 mask, you are exempt from the measures put in place to protect Jews. You cannot make this stuff up. God, these are horrible measures designed for Labor to pretend they're doing something to protect Jews while really only protecting their hate-filled voter base. Don't fall for it. Sign and share.
So, Wade, I guess that kind of, in a way, adds to what you were saying. What were your thoughts on what Avi just said there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, with any of these new pieces of legislation that they look at, Leon, you've got to ask yourself the question, and this is how the politicians operate. You wouldn't believe the lying scumbags as much as you can throw them with what they tell you at the start. It's always, what are the other things that they can be used for? That's always the plan, because they are not interested in keeping people safe. And as Avi just said then, if if people have some sort of religious thing, or maybe, you know, the masks for medical, they're giving them a back door, and they're appeasing the very people who are using this stuff in the first place. So, you know, it's either all or nothing, and it can't be all, so it has to be nothing. We've got to make sure we get rid of this stuff before it even hits the ground, because I'm telling you right now, with the government's, and this is the lens that we need to look at this through, Leon, with the government's absolute attitude to shut down protests of all kinds, particularly against it. That's what this is about. If they can talk about masks, well, that's only a scam at the minute. This mask thing is just a scam. But they mentioned terrorist flags. So once they get the legislation in place, then all of a sudden, anybody who disagrees with the government will then be called a terrorist, and you won't be able to protest. You won't be able to use your banners and flags, depending on what organisation you belong to. That is where this is going. That is it. There's no dispute. These are the facts. That's where it's going. And we all must fight strenuously against this and see it for the liars that Jacinta Allen is, and the whole government, and anybody in the police who say this is about keeping people safe. They are barefaced liars. It's as simple as that.
I couldn't think of anything worse. I mean, that argument, you know, giving them more powers. You've got a government here and a police force that have clearly operated a two-tiered system. So they would go after certain people, minorities. So, for example, they would give Jewish people move on orders in the city, but they would give far left-wing and you know, radical Islamists free reign to do what they want. They would also target Christians. They target Christians a lot, and other groups and minorities. I couldn't think of anything more absurd, more counterintuitive than giving this same government even more powers, thinking that it's somehow going to fix the problem. I mean, the propaganda that's used to push this is just mind-boggling. What can we do to counter this? What practical steps can we do to counter something like this?
So I think, Leon, that you know, as with everything, we need to put the case up based on the facts. And you know, when we see anything from government trying to say they're going to keep us safe, let's have a bit of a look at the other side of whatever's happened to get to this point, because I think public education and public knowledge is one of the most powerful things. And then the other thing, of course, is we need to try and get everybody together who's ever protested and say, well, we need to come together as the people and say we're not prepared to take that, because there's a lot of protesters that I don't agree with. I think are just crackpots and nutters. But this is our country, and you have the right to protest. You have the right to view your position and make that public. And I think if they start picking off one lot, then they'll pick off another lot. And I mean, as I said, we look at the history. We remember back to the protests about lockdowns, where people were attacked by armed terrorists who were wearing police uniforms at the time, and guns and so on. But we look at just before that, they had the Black Lives Matter protests in Melbourne, and they were walking around disregarding all the so-called health instructions, and the cops were doing nothing at all about that. So, in fact, I saw some of the cops in Melbourne, as ridiculous and stupid as this is, bending down on one knee. So they absolutely use our law enforcement as political weapons and military against the people, depending on what the issue is. But the other thing to keep in mind is, how did we get to this point right now? You know, have we seen over the years, and if we backtrack, we look at policies of bringing other people and other cultures into Australia or into the Western world, for that matter, who have very, very distinctive and powerful ideological objectives and beliefs, and are prepared to become very, very physical and violent to pursue those ideologies. So we've seen the Western world in the last, I don't know, say 40 years, crammed full of these kind of people who have demonstrated internationally a absolute no problem. They'll use violence and they'll attack for one group of people, in this case is the Jews. So we've crammed our country full of these kind of people, which then only needed some kind of flashpoint internationally to kick this all this stuff off, which we saw with the invasion of Israel there just recently. So, you know, I think you could quite reasonably say the entire thing here has been a setup. It's been orchestrated and planned for at least 40 years, I would suggest to you, because that is what the evidence would prove. And, you know, as anybody, I have no problem with immigration to different countries, but you must not allow immigration in such numbers as to a vastly different culture can become so populated and powerful in your country. So, you know, there's some very, very serious problems here that have been set up over many, many years. And now I think that the specific plan that was put in place is now bearing fruit for the people who hate our country. And we're seeing these enormous racial and religious tensions spilling out into the streets, which, I put it to you, was the actual plan in the first place of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, those kind of people. So that's my take on it, Leon.
It's interesting because Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, newly elected, has only been in power for a few months, actually came out and openly said that the whole open border immigration, where they allowed, you know, hundreds of thousands or millions of people in the West, throughout the West, to come in, was an experiment. So I thought that admission was interesting, because that's the first time we heard a leader, because in the past we heard that the COVID vaccines were an experiment, but this is the first time that a Western leader has admitted that this is an experiment. It's actually an invasion. This is not an immigration. We've got men of fighting age coming from countries like Syria, ostensibly to seek refuge. But these are men that should be fighting and defending their country. And now that the civil war is over there, they've got no plans to go back there. They're going to stay. And then in the United States, you've got people from all over the world, including China, Chinese men of fighting age, just casually walking through the Mexican border right into the United States. So it's quite literally an invasion. There's no other way to describe it.
Yeah, look, I think that based on the evidence and the facts, you would have to describe this as an invasion. There's no two ways about that. They've set the United States up to be an absolute firecracker, and depends on what you look at in terms of conspiracy theories or who you think was pulling whatever levers or all the rest of it. What they've created in the US is the capacity for the entire country to blow up. And that's once again based on nothing more than the evidence. Keep aside for a minute the ideology. The evidence is there are people that hate the US. They have told us time and time again that they've got to take the United States down in order to achieve their new world order. They've got to destroy the United States. And that's been happening. They're planting all the people in there where this is going to explode, because they're not going to go to so much trouble to plant that many people and then not pull the trigger. So that is going to happen. The US is going to erupt in civil war. There's no doubt about that. And Australia, if you look at, I think Germany is a classic example of massive over-immigration. And if we look at Angela Merkel, who was in charge at the time, once again, she is another terrorist who's from the World Economic Forum organization. So they've deliberately charged their countries to a powder keg situation, and now they're providing the sparks. So I think that this is absolutely an invasion, and there's very, very serious consequences going to happen throughout the world. And, you know, the people need to be made aware of this. And as I continually say, public education on the facts, no wishy-washy crap, tell it as it is, and let the people become informed so they can then become engaged in what's happening in their life and in their country.
It seems like, as bad as the situation is in the United States, it seems like Britain is well ahead of the United States. That country's really fallen apart, and they've gone to the point where their police are acting as a personal security to the radical Islamists, and they're going around and they're arresting elderly people and jailing them over Facebook posts. It's quite an absurd situation, quite surreal that we're seeing. And I can see a comment here from David Anthony. Trump is part of their plan. What are your thoughts, Wade? Is he part of the plan? Is he just a Manchurian candidate?
I'm not 100% sure, to tell you the truth, Leon. The jury, I think, to some degree is still out on that. But, you know, I had concerns about Trump when he initiated the Operation Warp Speed. I had very serious concerns then. If I was the people who were orchestrating all this, then you would bring a Trump card into play. You know, tactically, that is smart. So I really think that, you know, we're seeing a hell of a lot that's orchestrated, and Trump could be that. I don't know. I hope with everything that I've got that he's not. Because if he is, well, we're in serious bother. So let's just hope that Trump and RFK turn out to be who they say they are. Otherwise, I think we're in a lot of strife. So I'm not. I can't say one way or another, but you know, we're going to be in trouble if that's the case.
Well, RFK has said some promising things, going after holding big pharmaceutical organizations accountable, getting rid of their immunity, which has pretty much shielded them, and gave them a blank check to commit some of the worst crimes against humanity, not just in the United States, but also in Australia and other Western countries. Interesting question from Martin Taylor. Now, I don't expect you to have an answer, but it's an interesting question nonetheless. What's your estimated time frame for a civil war in the USA taking place? I know you're not a prophet, Wade, unless it's something that you didn't tell us.
No. There's I'm just a bloke from the bush here, mate. No prophets here, I'm afraid. We work on evidence, as I said. That's it. But look, I think that the capacity for that to happen within the next year is certainly on the cards. We've got it. They're going to have 4 years of Trump, and that's even if he does get to the White House and nothing happens to him. But you know, I think they've been priming this for a long, long time. They're going to be talking about, you know, another pandemic at some point in the very near future. They've told us this many times. So I think that if they had more pandemic lockdowns and shut down America's capacity to defend itself with its own citizens, its own armed citizens, they lock down the majority of people who will obey. That would give the terrorists who they've imported into America a great advantage. So and I think also the similar with England. It depends on who you look at and listen to. I think that England has been the government in England have been priming England for a massive internal attack as well. We're seeing a lot of that being set up. They're not doing that for nothing. And I look at all the disgusting, pathetic excuses for English coppers. They are a joke. They are absolutely a disgrace to the human race. The English police, when they're just going about arresting people for saying something, and they're not arresting the other side for saying even worse. Like these people, they are a disgrace. They're not English people with any integrity. They are just scum for hire. That's all they are. Because the bottom line is, as we saw with Nuremberg, if you're getting orders that you know are wrong, and you know that this is going to have a very, very serious effect on people's lives in the country, if you are that low life that you're going to enforce those things, then you don't deserve to live in any country. You deserve to be banished to, I don't know, look, whatever, somewhere, but you don't deserve to live amongst, decent people. You are just filth, and that's all there is to it.
And by the way, people that are listening tonight, yes, I can confirm that we are live. We've got a pulse. Usually I pre-record the interviews, as Jan noted, but yes, we are live. Feel free to ask your questions for Wade. Now, some weird stuff has been happening. More and more UFO sightings in America, in other parts of the world, and drones, and I'm hearing a lot of noise about and whispers about Operation Bluebeam. Probably one of the most bizarre theories that I've heard before, but nothing surprises me from the establishment. Have you been following it much, and what are your thoughts on what's going on with this?
I haven't been following it a whole lot. I've heard bits and pieces of it, Leon, but if we go right back decades ago, people have reported UFO sightings. You've got all the Area 51 stuff in the US and whatever. So I think a couple of interesting points. Number one, I think if the human race thinks that they're the only intelligent beings in this entire universe, I think that's pretty sort of arrogant and pretty silly, really. But the other thing to keep in mind is if there are, these people or these aliens or whatever's going on, if that is in fact real, then they would have the technology to wipe out the human race in a matter of minutes, you would have to think. So there's some strange things there to ponder. I'm not really sure. We hear a lot now of military weapons that, they can project UFO sightings in the sky and they can do all this, that, and the other thing. So I'm really not 100% sure. But it'd be like us, going back to the caveman days with what we've got now, and having the capacity to wipe out the cavemen or whatever. So it doesn't actually make any sense. It's not logical. It doesn't add up. So I think it'll have to be a case of watch this space. But I reckon if we start getting all these news reports of alien attacks all over the globe, and we all have to unite as one to fight the aliens, blah blah blah, I think we should be fairly skeptical about that and not get too panicked, I think, myself.
They've been movies about this for decades, like Independence Day in the mid-90s, where the whole human race gets together and they fight off these aliens. So we might be dealing with some predictive programming, but it's certainly quite bizarre, to say the least. Just another question here, another interesting question from Martin Taylor. What do you think will be the catalyst for a US civil war? So Trump not taking the presidency, or the other end where Trump is ousted again?
That's a very good question, Leon. I think that the enormous left-wing backlash in 2016 when Trump won the election then, combined with a lot of the division that's been caused with all the stuff to do with COVID and all that kind of thing, they're definitely putting in place the divisions. They're putting in place the political ideologies. So I think it's going to be interesting. I don't think they will wait till as long as till Trump's gone. So I think it's going to be sooner more so than later. But it's interesting times here and very dangerous times. I can't see him waiting till 2028. That's my thing. So any time between now and then, while Trump's in business, I think that's when it's going to happen.
Now, another interesting question, this time from Jason Cornick. I think I've heard bits and pieces about this, but I'm not fully across it. What do you think of the story of Prince Andrew being involved with Chinese spies? What are your? Do you know much about it? Have you been following that at all?
Not a great deal, but I mean, I would not put it past him, as we know his frollies with other very, very serious criminals and the international criminal set. So I wouldn't doubt that at all. I do remember seeing a report that I think Daniel Andrews might have been involved with Chinese spies in his office. Just rumours, of course, so we can't verify that, of course. But if you look at old Charlie there, old King Charles now, the royal family's connection with the elite, so-called elite organisations that are trying to implement this one world order, this one world government, and the Prince Charles's involvement with many of these groups and things that are anti their own country, anti-England, as well as they are anti the Western world. I think that if you go back to Prince Philip's connections to a lot of those groups that are extremist left-wing, and then you look at also Klaus Schwab, who the English royal family, who aren't actually the English royal family, but it's another story.
They're German.
What's that? Sorry, Leon?
They're Germans, German origin.
Yep. So if you go back to Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab is always singing the praises of the Chinese terrorist organisation who runs the CCP, and who the things that they do to their own people. And Klaus Schwab thinks that's a great model, that it's terrific. So I think that it's absolutely plausible that Prince Andrew or even King Charles himself is tied up with the Chinese to their eyeballs.
Do you think, well, I mean, you mentioned that they might have another pandemic. Do you think that's something that could happen very soon?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. We've got here in Melbourne, they're going great guns as fast as they can to try and build factories and so on to build more of these mRNA biological weapons to be used against. Yep. And the filth bag of a premier we got here, Alan, he seems to be singing the praises of this thing time and time so loudly. So, and the thing is too, Leon, they've told us that, the next pandemic, people are going to sit up. Bill Gates said the next pandemic, people are going to really take notice of this one. So
and he laughed.
What's that? Sorry, Leon.
He laughed as well when he said it. He had a smirk on his face. Him and Melinda, sorry.
So I think batten down the hatches and get ready, because yes, they will absolutely be bringing in another fraudulent, fake pandemic. The question is, are we going to be ready to retaliate? And I think that we're in a lot of trouble. I think that we really need to be taking into account where we are at the minute in community preparedness to understand that this is not some kind of a natural pandemic. This is an attack. And, I think the further away this attack is, the better, because it gives us more opportunity to educate more people about what it is, why it's happening, who's behind it, what's the end game, and what we can do about it. That's the most important thing for me, Leon.
I wonder how they're going to pull it off, because so many people have woken up. Even a lot of normies are skeptical. They just don't trust the government. I wonder what they're going to do, how they're going to pull it off this time if they were to have a pandemic.
So I'm actually going to do a live on this in the next, possibly tomorrow or the next day, because my opinion is this. If you remember that piece of filth Tony Fauci said a couple of years ago, and I'm trying to just remember the exact words. I might not get it. I might not get it word perfect, but he said, if you apply enough pressure to people, they will forget their ideological bullshit and go and get vaccinated. Now, that was words similar to that back then. So I think if we look at where we are now and what they've been putting in place, and we keep an eye on this from the lens of how much pressure they can apply to make people go and get these lethal injections. They've got in place the digital identification bill here in Australia. They're looking at the digital currency, the central bank digital currency, not far away. They've got this horrendous under 16 scam over the line, which makes people of all ages now, if you want to use the internet, it makes people of all ages will be forced to have digital identification. We've got all the carbon stuff in place, and I think in England now they've got some places where you have to provide your carbon ID or something like that to get some meat, and now there's restrictions on meat. We're seeing that Trudeau just started to go and freeze and seize people's bank accounts and assets and so on if they took part in any kind of protest. And as Daniel Andrews said a couple of years ago, when they said about, are you going to have any more lockdowns? He said, no, we're not going to have any more lockdowns. We're going to start locking people out. So people will have to be forced to take these lethal injections if they want to be able to be admitted to hospital, if they've broken their leg, been in a car crash, got a disease, can't breathe, having a heart attack. So they've got all these measures in place now that are just so much more powerful than they had before. So I think that if the people don't get smart, and many of the freedom leaders I certainly absolutely put in this category, if we don't get smart and beat this now by telling the truth and telling people what's actually happening, I think by the time we have a go at trying to defend ourselves against another pandemic, the weapons they'll have in place will be so powerful, you're going to be stuffed. And keep in mind, in Victoria, some scumbag taxi driver bloke who ended up in the Victorian Parliament voted, gave them the last vote to get the Public Health and Wellbeing Amendment Bill across the line, which basically gives the government the right to come in, drag you out of your house, and do whatever they want to you. So
I remember that.
I think that the only answer is that we need to really go full noise and educate as many Australians as possible as to where we're at, what's happening, and make them understand that this is being put in place, has been put in place for a reason. And if they thought they had trouble with the lockdowns and the forced vaccination poisons before, if they thought they had trouble before, I'd say you ain't seen nothing yet. And I would say to all the people who are just saying, oh, we just won't comply. Yeah, you better work out that you're going to. So the only option is defeat this now before they get to the point. Because once they start this attack, they'll be shutting down your social media. They'll be shutting down you. They'll be shutting down everything that you stand for, that you have, and that you are. So that's just my assessment of, once again, the facts. So I call on everybody that has a platform, tell the people the facts, irrespective of how much they don't want to hear it, or they get offended or upset or triggered or all the rest of that crap. They need to know the facts, because the facts are coming for them.
Do you think they will resort to forced vaccination, using the military or police to actually hold people down and forcibly inject people?
Absolutely, without any question at all, yes. There is no doubt in the world that they have been setting up to do precisely that. And from people I've spoken to, we already saw some degree of that out in some of the remote Aboriginal communities. There was pressure put on many of the people in the Aboriginal communities, and I'm saying this based on information that I've received from some people who are in those Aboriginal communities. We've seen, I think from memory, Bill Gates, if I remember correctly, was saying, you know, that the governments now need to use the military to enforce vaccinations. I see here in Western Australia, the Western Australian government a while ago started talking about using the military to lock down the Western Australian border and enforce other things. So, yeah, do I think they're going to use the military and the police and the authorised officers? And this is what they call them, Leon, authorised officers, who can be anybody that the government decides, could be foreign troops, to do this. So once again, the general population needs to understand how absolutely critically serious and dangerous this is, and the rest of the freedom movement need to get their mind right and understand also how serious and dangerous this is, and pull out all the stops and go for broke. Because if they, given what they've set up so far, if they pull the trigger, you're not going to have any capacity to resist or rebel at all. It's that simple.
You know, going back to the Aboriginals, what they did to the Aboriginals, the rumours anyway, but I believe, I have a tendency to, I'm inclined to believe these rumours. But where were the Aboriginal activists? They're always so loud and opinionated. Lydia Thorpe, where were you, Lydia Thorpe? Why weren't you speaking out against it? There was just nothing but silence, just crickets. Martin Taylor has another interesting question. So he's asking Wade, the pending question is, who are they? Who are these people?
Yep, and we get this quite a lot, Leon. So I mentioned them before, I listed them before. So it's always interesting when someone says, who are they? So the World Economic Forum is one of the groups we're talking about. They operate in conjunction with the United Nations. They operate in conjunction with the World Health Organization. And now they have enormous influence and control in our governments. and in fact governments around the world. So when I talk about the they, that's who I'm talking about. There are others, of course, but they are the primary culprits. They're the suspects, the main suspects. And, you know, that includes the likes of Bill Gates and George Soros and a whole host of others that consider themselves to be the elites. So that's the they that we always talk about. And for people who are coming into this fresh and new, there's an enormous amount of homework to do. But if you look up the likes of the World Economic Forum, you look up the likes of the United Nations, you look up the likes of the World Health Organization, and then look up how many of your politicians are affiliated with or associated with or a part of the Young Global Leaders program, who, you know, that is the WEF, the UN and the WHO, and they make up what we call the New World Order or the One World Government. That's the WHO.
Pat actually made an interesting comment. The claim is here, they raided a Queensland town and white and Aboriginal people were ready at dawn and foiled the attack. Did you hear anything about that, Wade?
No, that's total news to me. I'm not sure. I've never heard of that. But if there were eyewitnesses who were there on the ground, then I'd be absolutely, happy to hear about that. I'm presuming that they're talking about that in the circumstance of the army and police trying to forcibly inject people of that community. I'm presuming that that's what they're talking about. But I would like to hear a lot about that. And the other part of it, of course, Leon, and I've heard some of these stories from what I believe to be fairly credible people. So where are all the lefty people who supposedly, support our magnificent Indigenous peoples and all the rest of this? Where are they? If outback Aboriginal communities have been attacked by government or by military forces here or police forces, where are all these latte drinking, Chardonnay sipping people? Where are they? They're supposed to care about the Aboriginal people and culture and all the yes voters, with the treaty thing. All these yes voters, where are they? Why aren't they actually speaking up?
What about Lydia? Yep. She's got a very big mouth on her. She never shies away from giving her opinion. By the way, she's not even Aboriginal. It turns out that both of her parents are from the United Kingdom. So the joke is on all of us that we have to put up with this loud mouth that just doesn't shut up. By the way, Pat mentioned Gympie was the location, apparently, of this foiled attack.
Well, okay, that would be interesting to get some much finer details. I think it'd be really, really great to get some better details because, this is the kind of stuff that the Australian people need to know about. This is the kind of stuff that the international people need to know about. And as you've alluded to right there tonight, Leon, we have all these countries, Western countries, where they're all on about the Indigenous people or whatever, the original inhabitants, all this stuff, no better than the US with the Indians. Well, yeah, I mean, and that's all just crap. Everyone's sick to death of that garbage. But at the end of the day, we look at Australia here and we hear so much, particularly from a lot of these universities who are really ramming this Aboriginal crap down everyone's throat. Well, where are they? Where's the so-called leadership of the Aboriginal people calling out the things that are being done wrong? Because I can tell you right now, and this is something I don't need anybody to tell me about, I've seen, myself, that many of the Aboriginal people live in these missions and many of the worst communities. They are living in third world conditions.
That's right.
And this has got nothing at all to do with throwing money at anything, because as we saw with ATSIC back in the day, a lot of those so-called Aboriginal leaders of the day, and who are now, some of them were heavily involved in the campaign to sell this voice crap, are reported as taking a whole huge amount of the money and disappearing with it. So, we've seen probably by now billions of dollars thrown at the Aboriginal problem, and it's not improved because it's got nothing to do with money. It's got to do with the people who are there actually telling the truth and actually fighting to try and bring Aboriginal people up to speed and out of their third world country prisons. And this is, a lot of these so-called leaders are guilty of keeping them in these third world prison situations, because they continually tell us, well, we can't have anybody else interfering because they don't understand Aboriginal culture and all the rest of this crap. Well, that's not Aboriginal culture, mate. It's criminal activity where we've got, women and kids who their daily life is about getting bashed and raped and murdered and all that sort of stuff. That is not an Aboriginal culture. That is crime. And while we continually have good people who are banned from taking some kind of action against this, you're going to continually have Aboriginal people living in these third world shocking conditions. And I put it to you that is exactly where many of these Aboriginal activists want them. They want them there to be used for political mileage. And I think we can fix this up very fast. It's just a point of understanding the rules of the game and who's doing what here and for what reasons.
Mm. And you talk about third world conditions, the appalling third world conditions of the Indigenous people on these reservations and missions out in the outback. I'm sure the welcome to country ceremonies that all these inner city leftists do and all these large corporations do, like Qantas and all these big banks and super funds, I'm sure that when they say that, it solves a problem, it rectifies the whole situation. Definitely, no doubt in my mind. Mark's actually made a comment there. Yes, Mark, myself and even Wade would be really interested to chat with the people on the ground there in Gympie who had witnessed this attempted assault and were able to foil the attack 100%. If they're willing to talk, 100%, we would be very keen.
Absolutely.
Wade, is there...
Yes.
Yeah, definitely, to see what's on there. By the way, Jacinta Ardern, you may have heard of this. Her father, I believe he was some kind of high-ranking police officer, and they went on an island somewhere off New Zealand, off the coast of New Zealand, and they forced vaccinated. It was under his direction, the Indigenous population on that island. Did you hear anything about that? It was during the pandemic.
Yes, I did. I'm probably getting a bit scratchy on the details now, but I did have an opportunity a couple of months ago or similar to be on stage with Liz Gunn, and she was telling me some of these things that were happening or that happened over in New Zealand to some of the Maori people over there. And as far as I can recall, that they were virtually imprisoned on their own island, and they suffered shocking consequences and reactions and results of being forcibly or virtually forcibly blackmailed and made to take these injections. And I think that the results were horrendous in terms of reactions and deaths from these poor people. And I think that just goes to speak Leon, to what I was saying a bit earlier, is that if we have another pandemic declared here in Australia or the Western world, we're going to see that kind of force and that kind of measures being used to force people to get these lethal injections called vaccines, but they're not. So I think we've seen we've had a taste of what's going on and what they're prepared to do. And I think I remember now talking to some of the people about some of these Aboriginal communities who were forcibly poisoned and attacked. And I'm pretty sure that I was told they had roadblocks at places and they were blocking community off from getting fresh water and food. I'm pretty sure it was the military and the police forces and so on up north there were actually stopping people from getting water and food. Now, I don't doubt this at all. It is totally logical, given that what we saw in Melbourne when the terrorists in police uniforms, under the direction of the King terrorist Daniel Andrews, locked down at seconds' notice some kind of a high-rise building in Melbourne. I remember that happening. So people were complaining about not being able to get food and water. So, people better take this damn serious. And if there's any stupid ones out there going, oh, that's just conspiracy theories, no, that happened. That's what they're prepared to do. And if you listen to many of the people that were in the prisons that were known as the hotel quarantine, I think you'll get some pretty horrendous stories of people being denied food and water and proper care in those facilities. And when we look at it now, Leon, the governments across Australia have built massive prison systems, enormous. They call them quarantine centres, but they're not. They are not quarantine centres at all. They are concentration death camps. That's my view on it. And so I think, once again, any of the people who have a platform or any of our so-called freedom leaders or whatever need to get the lead out and start laying this on the line so we can actually educate people and form some kind of a resistance before it takes hold. Because if they declare a pandemic, especially with the international health regulations in place, then that hands full power over to the World Health Organization, and they will take absolute control of your country. Then you'll definitely see military and police on the streets going after you and shutting down your food supply, shutting down your fuel, your right to move around the country. We've seen a taste of it before. Well, the next one's going to be full blown.
And Pat, if you can shoot me a direct message, I'd be very keen to speak with these people. Interesting comment from Heather Bannister. She says that it was the island of, forgive me, Tikalo. I can't pronounce it, but the Patlicios. Again, I'm breaking my teeth. Is that a tribe or is that a family name? Were under house arrest for over a year. Couldn't even fish for food from the beach that was in front of their house. I'm assuming that was a tribe somewhere out in New Zealand, a Maori or a Maori clan that were under house arrest. But yeah, that's quite horrific to say the least. Wade, I want to give you the floor in conclusion of tonight's podcast. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience tonight?
Well, I'd like to say, Leon, that first of all, we wish everybody as merry a Christmas and a happy New Year as they possibly can. But I also want to say that 2025 is going to be a year where we need massive action. We need to throw off the shackles and the ridiculous stupidity of, well, we can't say too much to people because they'll get upset and triggered and all the rest of that garbage. And as we've just described, what's going to happen if we don't stop this is going to trigger people 1,000,000 times worse, and they won't have any option to do anything about it. At the minute, there's still a small window of opportunity to do something about it. So, you know, our whole platform and what Billboard Battalion is about education. It's about telling people the facts. And if that's a little bit unpalatable, Leon, or if it ruffles their feathers, stiff. Get over it. Understand what's happening. Look past your inabilities and your biases and your emotions and all the rest of this crap, and start to look at the facts. Look at what's happening. Understand where we are at, because, you know, we are fighting here for our kids' lives and our grandkids' lives, as everybody should be. So, you know, we will continue into the new year. Billboard Battalion will go as hard as we possibly can, despite any, you know, ridiculous nonsense, you know, because we all need to get on the same page, Leon. And that's where I appreciate very much having conversations with you, because there's no mucking around. You know, it's just straight shooting, because in a world where there's so much confusion and so much just propaganda and half-cut bits and pieces, we need straight shooters, mate. And, you know, we listen to a few other podcasters and so on. I've done interviews with a number of them, and there's some really, really good people around. But, you know, I want to encourage people to have hope. But to have hope, you must be taking action. You can't just sit there and go, oh, well, you know, I believe we're going to win, and I know it's all going to be great and blah, blah, blah. Well, I can't see the evidence of that. And I think that we can achieve that, Leon, but we must all get in the fight and get very serious, because this is your life and you're about to lose it. So let's all work as Australians, as our Anzacs did. We can do this, Leon. We can come together, but we've got to get rid of all the riffraff that just goes half-baked or just, you know, tries to play down how serious this is and believes in some, I don't know, some fairy tale is just gonna come along and fix it all for us. So the people we're fighting against, they don't believe in fairy tales. They are deadly serious. They've got the weapons, they've got the firepower, they've got the structures put in place. But we, the Australian people, we can beat them. We can defend our country, and we can win this. It's just a matter of the people knowing what the hell they're dealing with in the first place. And that's our role, mate.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Christmas, and I'm looking forward to that. And hopefully it's not going to get cancelled this year by the establishment. It's unfortunate because, you know, when Australia or the establishment had turned its back on Christianity, we can see that the country has gone downhill massively, especially after they passed the Same-Sex Marriage Act in 2017. You could see a massive change and shift in this country and the way that the society is going. But also this year, Hanukkah coincides with Christmas as well on the same day. Usually doesn't happen because the Jewish calendar follows a lunar calendar. So it's very rare that it happens. But the message of Hanukkah is quite strong. The message of Hanukkah, this is a story where you had a father and his sons. So it was just him and his 6 sons, the Maccabees. The father's name was Matisyahu. They were a clan of priests. They rebelled against, at the time, the land of Israel, the Holy Land, was being occupied by Syrian Greeks. They were descendants of the army of Alexander the Great. And they were the ancient version of the globalists. I mean, the globalists are pretty much just an offshoot of these people. They were basically promoting the same values that today's globalists are promoting, like transgenderism, LGBTQ, all this nonsense they were promoting, tyranny. And you had a small group, just a man and his sons, take them on and rebel against them. And not only were they fighting against the most powerful army in the world, but they also had a lot of resistance and pushback from their own people. So there was also a civil war because there were many Jews that had sided with the Greeks. But the message of Hanukkah is that it only takes a small group of people, just a fraction of 1%, to make a difference and turn the whole situation around. Wade, in conclusion, how can people follow you? I've put some links down in the description below. So there's you're on Facebook, so the Billboard Battalion, on X, Rumble. Is there anywhere else where people can find you?
Well, we've got our website, Leon, which is billboardbattalion.com. We're also on Facebook there, so that's a few ways that people can get hold of us. We do have on our pages there, we've got also spaces where people can donate to Billboard Battalion for, to help keep us in the fight, become members, do all sorts of things like that. So, and also, we do quite a lot of lives. We do quite a lot of public speaking around the countryside. So, keep an eye on what's happening there. And I want people to rest assured that given our government are trying to take down all our institutions that matter and all of our cultural things that matter, we will certainly be doing something as much as we possibly can for Australia Day. Whether people agree with Australia Day or don't, we can't afford to let the government and the globalists continually destroy our institutions and our cultural whatever. We've seen Christmas under attack. We've seen Easter under attack, Mother's Day under attack, Father's Day under attack. And so another one that they're going after is Australia Day. So I urge everybody, get out and celebrate Australia Day as much as you can. If you see shops or businesses that refuse to acknowledge Australia Day or let their employees wear the stuff, the paraphernalia, do something about that. Not violent stuff or whatever, but make a bit of noise and let them know we're not prepared to just have them just extinguish Australia Day and then extinguish Christmas and then extinguish Anzac Day. We're not prepared to do that, and that is part of their plan. That is how you destroy a nation. That is how you make people nationless and vulnerable individuals. So I'd just like to finish on that, Leon.
You destroy a people by destroying their identity. That's quite evil. But yeah, what you're saying is definitely a remedy to counter what they are doing. Wade, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Hope to have you come back on soon. And everyone that's watching tonight, thank you so much for watching, and God bless you all.
Thanks very much, Leon, and happy Christmas to you. Merry Christmas to you, mate, and Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you.